Hey, how are you, listener? Welcome to another episode of the Cannabis Man podcast. Thank you for clicking on the show. I'm your host, Don Kleppen. And if it's your first time here, welcome. This is a show where we try to take a journalistic look at all things cannabis. Lot of excitement in the cannabis space right now as different U.S. states and countries around the world are legalizing it. And I, as a broadcast journalist in Chicago, I do news and traffic on the radio here, have for many years. And I thought as a personal cannabis user that after Illinois legalized it, I still found a few years later that there was some notable omissions, let's say. There was something missing from the conversations around cannabis, the typical conversations anyway. I guess what I found was that I was hearing a lot more Cheech and Chong jokes, let's say, stoner stereotypes being voiced, the same old kind of, humor, but also really reductive imagery in terms of what, the average stoner or cannabis user might be like. And there was very little discussion or knowledge out there about what cannabis can offer people's lives, medicinally or recreationally. So I decided to kind of take my experience as a broadcast journalist and take my personal experience with cannabis and kind of marry the two into this Cannabis Man podcast here. And I like to bring on guests every week if I can, guests who are somehow at the forefront of this legal cannabis movement, whether these be business owners, entrepreneurs, people who have created a product or service, or are, growers or breeders of genetics of cannabis strains and creating new strains, new products for you to try, as well as government officials. Also talking with people who are leading the groups that are responsible for policing and creating these policies in legal cannabis markets. I also like to bring on researchers, people who are doing different studies on cannabis. I've spoken with doctors, scientists, professors. I like talking with people who are utilizing the technology of today and utilizing their great experience and know-how in a laboratory to answer the questions that we all have about cannabis. What does it really do to the body? Tell us about the endocannabinoid system. Does it really protect the body against cancerous tumors? Does it do damage to the lungs after years of use the way cigarettes do? THC versus CBD. Are there any negative effects of either? What effect do they have on each other? Now throw alcohol into the mix. What happens to us then? These are the kinds of questions that are on a lot of people's minds, especially in new legal cannabis markets. There's a lot of people out there who, for one reason or another, never gave cannabis a shot, or maybe tried it and didn't really like their experience, which totally happens. A lot of reasons that could be behind that. And we talk about all this stuff on this show. This is kind of meant to be a light as we explore this new territory where cannabis is no longer prohibited fully. And as we move forward in this right now kind of patchwork legal system here in the U.S. anyway, as different states are legalizing until, fingers crossed and hoping this is soon. Hopefully, federally, it gets rescheduled, taken off the Schedule 1 substance list, hopefully decriminalized at the very least, but we'd love to see legalization fully and the establishment of an interstate market, some actual commerce where states could talk with one another and sort of maybe outsource some of the cannabis needs. I've had a guest on here talk about how seemingly foolish it is to be incentivizing all these individual state-run cultivation programs, or not state-run, but state by state, different companies doing their own cultivation programs, as opposed to maybe outsourcing it where cannabis can be grown almost year-round under the sun in places like California, Oregon, Hawaii, places where we know some of the best cannabis comes from. And it's the cost of growing it is so much lower because the conditions are great for them right outside. You don't have to build a whole infrastructure of an indoor grow house like you have to do here in Illinois because it's, cold for 6 months out of the year. That is the kind of thing where if we had interstate cannabis commerce, you could have these companies in different states around the country outsourcing their cannabis products to the places where it's grown the very, very best. So that's just a little taste of what we do here. I've got another great guest interview for you this week. This is a cannabis entrepreneur. He started the company Studio TBD, and he talks a lot about the philosophy of that company. They have some interesting ideas, and those are already being reflected in the products that they're bringing to market. I've tried some of the gummies that Studio TBD makes, high CBD doses and lower THC, and as my guest Robert Lund puts it later in the interview, they are trying to put the safety and the fun back into cannabis usage, and he's doing so by sort of having those high CBD levels and lower THC, and we get into more detail about why that is in the interview. So stay tuned for that. Also got the News Joint Wrap, which is a collection of news stories and events related to cannabis in the Midwest, all curated by IllinoisNewsJoint.com. Love the work they do over there. Jason Brown has put together a wonderful team, and all of them are focused, laser focused on the legal cannabis market, especially around Illinois, and any new developments that have come in with that. So I've got some stories and events to tell you about in there, and then after the interview, there's a couple of news stories, national-focused ones that I thought were worthy of your attention. So without further ado, let's get into this 41st episode of the Cannabis Man Podcast. That's the vibe right there, listener. Hopefully that theme puts you in a good mood, listener. Kicks off whatever session you're about to get started in as you listen to this show. Morning, noon, or night, weekday, weekend, whenever you might be listening to this. Thank you again for clicking on the show, and I hope that whatever session you're about to engage in, or whatever vibe you've got going on, I hope it's hitting you just right. And now let's get into the News Joint Wrap, brought to you, as always, by IllinoisNewsJoint.com. Think of it as the joint you can hit for all your Illinois cannabis news and reviews. And let's start with Illinois bills to solidify vehicle cannabis odor ruling. This was written by Jason Brown of Illinois News Joint and was posted a little over a week ago now from when I'm recording this, which is March 8th, 2023. The Appellate Court of Illinois in the 3rd District delivered a judgment last year in September that the, quote, smell of burnt cannabis alone did not provide an officer with probable cause to search the vehicle. Associate Judge Daniel P. Dalton of the Whiteside County Court said the decision hinged, quote, on the changing landscape of cannabis law. During the session of the 103rd General Assembly, 3 bills dealing with the smell of burnt or raw cannabis in a motor vehicle may solidify that appellate court ruling. The same day of that appellate court decision, the Senate President, the then Senate President of Illinois, Don Harmon, sponsored an amendment to the Illinois Vehicle Code and Cannabis Regulation and Tax Act. On January 24 of this year, Senator Rachel Ventura filed with the Secretary SB 0125, which amends the Vehicle Code and provides the, quote, odor of burnt or raw cannabis in a motor vehicle by itself shall not constitute probable cause for the search of a motor vehicle or person. HB 1205, which was filed by Representative Curtis Tarver, says, quote, if a motor vehicle is driven or occupied by an individual 21 years of age or over, a law enforcement officer may not search or inspect the motor vehicle, its contents, the driver, or the passenger solely because a law enforcement officer or a police dog trained in the detection of cannabis smelled that cannabis is present in the private motor vehicle. Provides that a defendant aggrieved by such unlawful search and seizure may move the court for the return of property and to suppress as evidence anything so obtained, end quote. So that is what has been added. That language has been added to the Cannabis Regulation and Tax Act, as well as the Illinois Vehicle Code. So as Jason Brown highlights so thoroughly here and does a great job as usual, these Illinois bills, which are moving through the legislature in Springfield right now, they are going to solidify that appellate court ruling from September of 2022, which basically states that the smell of cannabis alone, whether burning in a joint or bowl or just raw cannabis, stored, that alone is no longer enough for any police officer to stop, inspect, seize any property in the car, on the driver, on the passenger, anybody who's in there that's a private motor vehicle, and the smell of cannabis is no longer enough for a cop to get in your face, not anymore in the state of Illinois. So that is great news. And let's move on to another story, and that would be Illinois' February out-of-state sales drop nearly $6 million. The Department of Financial and Professional Regulation of Illinois announced earlier this month, March 2nd, that the 2023 February recreational sales totals, and the most significant of which came from out-of-state residents. The totals for the last year from out-of-state residents hovered between $35 and $43 million a month. This February of 23, those out-of-state resident totals dropped to $30,764,036. That's the lowest since February of 2021, which was $22,834,446. So I think it's noteworthy that February out-of-state sales totals seem to be kind of a low point. Again, this is 2023. Cannabis has been legal now for 3 years in Illinois. So any kind of standards, any kind of, patterns that we can identify, these are still very short term, and we're going to have to see for a while, look at it 5 years, 10 years down the line, and we can find out if February is really just kind of a slow sales month overall for cannabis, or if there's some kind of correlation with the out-of-state people not coming in, however that is. But it is also noteworthy that this February in 23 was almost 31 million from out-of-staters versus 2 years ago, it was only up near 23 million. So even though this is a drop in out-of-state sales totals for February, we're still 7 million higher than one of the lower points of this month, which was from 2 years ago. So maybe not as extreme or anything to necessarily worry about. I personally, sitting here now, I'm expecting a March out-of-state sales total to be a rebound from February. I expect that because a lot of people tend to come from out of state and visit Chicago around St. Patty's Day, March 17th. That time and that weekend thereafter, when they dye the river green and they've got the Southside Irish Parade and all of that, that brings in a lot of foot traffic to the city of Chicago. And I'm willing to bet that there are a lot of people that are going to be buying cannabis who don't necessarily live in Illinois. So watch out for, and I will certainly bring you the totals for March, but I'm willing to bet right now that March is going to see a rebound in out-of-state recreational cannabis sales totals from the drop that February just kind of showed us. And this might be an incentive, might be a bit of a deterrent, either way for you, listener, but I wanted to let you know I am planning to be at NECAN this June for the Illinois Cannabis Convention. I've been invited to participate in it by Jason Brown at IllinoisNewsJoint.com, so I'm planning to be there at their booth. They're going to have a table set up with, a lot of merchandise there and just kind of some information about the website they're doing, and I'm going to set up and do a live interview. I'll be talking with the guys there. We're going to be hosting some other guests, and should be a really good, fun time, and we're going to try and get, some information out about the Illinois cannabis market, some companies that are up and coming, and events that you can look forward to as this Illinois cannabis industry grows on. So that would be the NECAN Illinois Cannabis Convention one more time, June 2nd and 3rd at the Schaumburg Convention Center. You can get tickets and more information at NECAN, NECANN.com. Also, take a note down, if you'd like a 50% discount on general admission ticket prices, you can head to NECAN.com and use the promo code NEWSJOINT50 at checkout. And again, you can knock 50% off of that general admission ticket price. And of course, you can find out more about all these stories, news of cannabis in Illinois, and events coming up, all at IllinoisNewsJoint.com.
Hey, I'm Jackson Bragman, host of the Bragman Breakdown podcast. Here at TBD, we break down the latest happenings in sports and pop culture by talking to some of the most fascinating people from these fields, including Ohio State star forward Zed Key, Detroit Lions play-by-play announcer Dan Miller, and world number 2 ranked squash player Paul Cole. 2022 was huge for us, but bigger and better things are ahead for 2023. Listen to the Bragman Breakdown now, wherever you get your podcasts.
Okay, listener, my guest today is a cannabis entrepreneur, a bit of a creative mastermind. He's been a director and in different positions at agencies for advertising around the world, and he is right now doing some very exciting work at Studio TBD. They're building products which they believe are part of the next generation of cannabis products. Obviously, listener, and I've talked about on the show, legal cannabis is a rapidly evolving industry. There's there's things changing day by day, and the way that the system looks right now, state by state patchwork, that's not how it's going to continue for, the future of cannabis. It's not always going to look like that. Interstate commerce is going to eventually take over, and it's going to look a lot different. And what Robert Lund's company is doing at Studio TBD is really getting these products ready for that sort of future market. So without further ado, to tell you a little about all of that great work himself, Robert Lund. Welcome, Robert.
Thank you so much. It's a pleasure to be here.
Thank you for taking some time today. Really appreciate it. And can you just tell us a little about yourself? How did cannabis come onto your radar? Like I mentioned, you work in advertising. Was that related at all?
No, it actually wasn't. I've been using the plant since I was like 14, 15. I grew up in Sweden, in Northern Europe, which is, it actually has a pretty significant part in this journey when it comes to cannabis. And the biggest reason for that is that the quality of cannabis that you could get in Sweden in the 90s, when I grew up, was, let's say, not top notch.
Okay, got it. Some swag, some Swedish swag.
Yeah, it was a lot of hashish. And
if
you even had what you guys refer to as weed over here, the quality was obviously horrific.
Got it.
It was grown probably in Mexico, and then we got the worst part that had been imported for months. So yeah, I basically grew up and started using. I lived in Sweden for a long time. I started my professional career in the Swedish creative industry. And I didn't enter the creative industry until I was like 27, 28. So I had 5-6 pretty successful years at a pretty, well-known agency. And we did a bunch of stuff that, it got some wings. And in the creative industry, it's pretty simple. Like if you are attached to work that sort of becomes an industry sensation in any fashion, a lot of offers and stuff is starting to come in. So I basically moved to New York in 2012, and to reconnect it to cannabis, when I tried smoking the weed that you have here back then, I was like, oh wow, what is this?
I got it.
It's way stronger than I was used to.
Right. Sort of an awakening moment for you, I would imagine.
Absolutely.
That's cool. Okay, so you're in New York, and now cannabis, American cannabis, let's say, is sort of a part of your life. And, at what point did you sort of start thinking about cannabis as a business,
As soon as they started talking about legalizing it, I can't remember the years really, but I know that there had been a vote in California. They had said no in the first voting, but then Colorado legalized it together with Oregon, maybe. It was the first ones. And when I realized that, and when I realized also how extremely broad the cannabis industry is, the black market, like how many people that actually use the plant here in the United States of all ages and all types of people, I was like, this is going to be like alcohol after prohibition. So I started thinking about it very early. I'm like, I really wanted to get into this. I tried to get the agencies that I worked for to pitch work for cannabis companies. They didn't want to do that for tons of reasons. And when I decided that it was time for me to leave the creative industry in like 2015, sort of, 2015, 16, I knew that I was going to head towards cannabis. And the reason I left the creative industry was basically that I sort of lost confidence in the business model. I don't think that the creative industry of today is very functioning. I don't think it's not a great business model. And I could feel that this is going the wrong direction. And so when I sort of dropped out, is the way I think about it actually, I started a skincare brand here in New York based on hemp and CBD, because I wanted to get into the cannabis industry somehow. And I knew from the beginning that I don't want to get into the, let's call it for sake of argument, just the stoner niche of cannabis. I wanted to because I knew a bunch about it. I had studied the plant and its history and its properties. And I was like, this is way more useful than just to get super, super high.
Yeah.
I knew that my place as a creative, because I am a creative and I'm a communicator, I knew that the most sort of potent spot for me in this industry were probably somewhere where I could help the plant go mainstream, so to speak, and be more accepted.
Totally.
So that's why I started a really premium skincare brand called Herb Essentials. It's still around, and we're actually reviving the brand now, which is kind of cool.
Oh, nice.
And that went pretty well. We did really well. In the beginning, it started as a side project, became like a full-time project and a business, got funding, like sort of a pre-seed round, and then 2020 happened with the crazy lockdown and all of that. So that sort of it put a real dent, and it set us back to the beginning basically with that brand, unfortunately, and I had to sort of like deconstruct it again back to a side project. And in the meantime, I had done a lot of consultancy to CEOs and chief marketing officers, almost like think of it as a minor or a tiny deconstructed agency that had capacity to work with big clients. And I did that for a while. But I sort of felt, again, like the creative industry needs to sort of burn down before it can be rebuilt. You can't, I don't think, at least I could not, be a good agent for change in there, because the system is super rigid.
You've mentioned that. I'm just kind of curious. I'm wondering if you is there any specific you can offer in terms of like what it is that you think, like which creative, does the complaint you're kind of offering, does that touch all parts of it? Are we talking about music? Are we talking about, videography, shooting movies? Like which parts of it, sort of in your estimation are like untenable? What has to change about it?
I think it touches all parts of it, but I think what I'm talking about mostly is the commercial creative industry, advertising, design, strategy, PR,
Got it.
Stuff like that. Communications, creative and communications in the commercial space, and it's a very deep topic, but I think the sort of elevator pitch I can there is that the creative side doesn't understand business, and the business doesn't understand the creative side, and they just end up fighting about it. And it's both sides' fault in different versions. So
totally get it.
I just I'm taking a step out, and I'm just looking at it as, and you see that it's happening too. Budgets are getting smaller and smaller. There's less respects in all directions. It's just it's just a mess, to be honest.
A lot of outsourcing, and I'm sure AI is not helping that either. You know what I mean? I mean, not that it's related. I don't know that's what you were saying necessarily, but I just mean that you throw that factor into the already sort of potent mix of the creative types versus sort of managerial or accountant types who don't see eye to eye on things, and then you throw into a mix a great outsourcer, a tool like AI, which is sort of I think from a bean counter perspective, let's say, or from some higher ups, I believe that they look at AI as a substitute for creatives rather than like an aid or a tool. Is that kind of fair?
Yes, I would say that to give it a little more color, I would say that for the bean counters, to use your rhetoric.
I'm sure I'm going to get nailed for that, but it's but I stand by it.
You're not wrong though.
Thank you.
I think it becomes a very potent weapon to lower the budgets even more, let's say. Mm-hmm. And then we can start a whole debate, which we should not start. It's like, has AI the ability to be creative? I don't think so.
Right.
I think the only thing that it can do is to replicate things they've done before, and that is basically by definition not being creative.
Right.
But let's do an episode about the creative industry soon, because I could talk about that for hours.
Totally. Yeah, I get that. I get that. And I'm right there with you. It is a deep topic, and I appreciate you. We shouldn't get too far into the weeds on that, especially when there's great stuff in the weed industry to talk about. And one thing that, was mentioned, on your website bio and just kind of in the work on Studio TBD's website is the talk about cannabis and its cultural narrative. I talk about this on the show all the time. I named the show the Cannabis Man podcast as opposed to, Marijuana Man or something like that. And one of the, reasons is I've talked a lot about how cannabis needs a rebrand. We need, ideally, if we could just use one of those Men in Black, memory wipe buttons and just wipe everybody's knowledge of reefer madness and all that dare education education from the 1900s and start over from scratch, that'd be great. But, why, Robert, do you think that, cannabis, what does it need to do to sort of get a new cultural narrative?
I think it's a lot, actually. And I think it's more than I have come to learn that it's more that needs to be done than what even I thought. It's a pretty big topic, this too, so let's see where I begin. Well, let's begin at where I ended. So at the end of 2020, the Herb Essentials were back to a side project. I did not want to go back into creative into the creative industry in any capacity, and I tried to figure out what to do. And a good friend of mine introduced me to my current business partner, Victor, and said that Victor's an ex-hedge fund trader. He has this amazing cannabis product. He needs someone like you. And we talked, and basically what he had done is that he had created a type of product as a drink and an edible that was a ratio product that had small to medium levels of THC and large levels or big levels, high levels of CBD. And what was interesting to me is that I'm like, well, that's really interesting because I rolled my joints that way. Because like I said before, the sort of American weed, I was like, that's too strong for me. So I had over the years started to rolling my joints with like a nugget of THC weed, like let's say 30-35% THC potent weed, together with like a big nugget of CBD weed.
Fascinating.
And that was my joints, and that became actually in my friend circles. It got a name, like it was called a Robert joint.
Nice.
So when I went to parties and stuff like that, I always had to bring like 4 or 5 or 6 of them so that I could have one for myself.
Exactly. Yeah.
And because a lot of people, and I live in New York City. I'm pretty. Have my feet pretty deep into the soil of the underground disco culture that's rapidly becoming overground disco culture again, which is fun. And so I'm surrounded by people that party a lot, that party hard.
Nice.
And, people that do all kinds of drugs. But many of them, even the most drug liberal among them, were like, well, I don't really use cannabis because it makes me weird. I have no problem using other stuff, but the only cannabis I'm using is the Robert joint. So that started happening. And when Victor started talking about this, I'm like, I'm way ahead of you, man. Like, you can stop selling me on this. Like, I love this.
Right, I'm already there.
Let's do it.
Exactly.
I'm already there.
That's so fascinating. Yeah, exactly. I think that's great that you kind of already you'd come upon a formula. You had basically sussed out a mixture of, dosing a product that was a little more in line with what your tolerance and your desire was from a cannabis product. And, you were already kind of branding it. It was out there in parties and stuff. And so it sounds like it was kind of a perfect fit to get and that seems like what brought about Studio TBD between you and Victor, right?
Exactly. That's exactly what happened. And to tie it to your question about culture and what we need to do here, you have to be sort of aware of a part of cannabis history that is rarely talked about. I've never heard anyone else but myself talk about it, to be honest. We all know that the prohibition against cannabis is a very, very dirty, messy, and unfair and just horrible affair, right?
Awful.
And probably not too unlike the prohibition against alcohol in the 20s and 30s. So I started reading about all this stuff, and one thing it's easy to figure out all the bad things that have happened because of prohibition. And personally, I believe that the American prohibition that then became global when it comes to cannabis is also like the foundation for the entire war on drugs, which is also another disaster.
Totally.
Right? So let's not get stuck in there because everyone has heard that. Everyone's heard a lot of different parts of that.
Agreed.
There's one part of that is had a huge impact on cannabis that nobody talks about, and that is how prohibition changed the plant itself. So that's the basis of our entire idea for our company. So back in, I like to pull it back to like 1969, Woodstock, Summer of Love, all that stuff. Because if you think about it, when you say culture and cannabis and stoners, you're probably referring to rap music a lot. You're probably referring to Southern California and sort of what grew up in the 90s.
Yeah, right.
Since the 90s, weed has been like very, very tightly connected to that kind of attitude, that kind of culture.
Right.
And the reason that it ended up there is that the plant has changed. So in 1969, the culture around cannabis was peace, love, and understanding, right? It was about fun. It was not about attitude or getting super high or whatever.
Yeah.
It was about fun and connection and music and love.
Socializing in the group, yeah, totally.
Socializing in a group, not like sitting in a corner by yourself.
Right.
So in 1969, the THC level and the CBD level in the weed that was smoked in Woodstock were around 5 to 7%.
Okay.
So 5% THC, 5% CBD.
Okay. Very low grade, like microdosing kind of stuff.
Yeah, that's the natural state of the plant.
Mm-hmm.
What has happened since then is that the potency in THC has gone up.
Supercharged.
By around 700%.
Yeah, totally. It's massive now.
Insane amount.
To go from 5% to like 35
like 34,
now.
45.
Yes.
Yeah, like the records right now is closing in on 50.
That's
and
insane.
over the last 10 years, like the curve has, it's an exponential curve now. So it goes faster and faster, becomes stronger, faster and faster.
Right.
And what happens when you manipulate a cannabis plant to produce buds with that insane high level of THC, even if you try to push it up just towards the 20s, the level of CBD in the plant drops to 0. And so that's a scientific fact. The next scientific fact is pretty interesting too, which is that CBD actually helps curb the side effects of THC.
Yes, and I've spoken with other guests on the show about exactly that. Matt Wall, UK scientist, did an fMRI study, an earlier episode, and he said exactly, the conclusion was exactly what you just said, which is that CBD really blunts a lot of the negative impact of THC. And he was saying the same thing you did, which is that the strains of cannabis we have now, which are around 30-35% of THC, which have been designed to really crank up that level of THC. Now we're starting to see these psychoactive problems manifest themselves in different, especially younger people. It's pretty clear. I think the evidence, as you were just saying, the evidence is there and it's compelling that high THC and no CBD is problematic in cannabis.
Absolutely. And it's problematic over time, but what's so cool with this plant is because how fast the function is, it's problematic immediately. Mm-hmm. Like if I smoke a sativa strain that is like upwards 30, 35, like I don't want to go out. I just want it to end as quickly as possible.
Right.
Take me out of this.
Yeah, I've been there for sure.
Yeah, and some people react differently. Some people don't have that problem, but maybe indica makes them drowsy instead, or maybe like there's a lot of different. It's very personal.
It is,
and people react very differently to it. But so basically, our whole design of our actual product is to alleviate all these side effects and try to create the most nice, relaxing, non-problematic high ever. And what's really cool about it is that also negates the long-term side effects, which can actually be pretty dangerous. In our pitch deck that we showed to our investors is the second slide actually has that one of those one of the Reefer Madness poster. And basically, what we're stating there is that what's ironic is that these lies were used to make the plant illegal. Over that time that it has been illegal, the plant has now morphed into a different plant, I call it Frankenstein weed, that actually gives the propaganda merit.
It's
crazy.
It is crazy. A self-fulfilling prophecy in a way, the way that you just put that.
Exactly.
Yeah. Very strange how that has panned out here.
Yeah, so our products are basically, we have two different strengths. We do both beverage and edibles, and we also do it both in the hemp market and in the cannabis market, which we can get back to. So the two different strengths are, the first one we call mellow, it's 425, so it's 4 milligrams of THC, 25 milligrams of CBD. And the other SKU is called high, which has 10 milligrams of THC and 20 milligrams of CBD. So these two experiences are quite different from each other. It's not just that one is stronger than the other, they're also quite different.
Totally. And
425 is way more relaxing.
It is. And
it's still relaxing, but a little more potent.
Yes, yeah, agreed. And I just wanted to jump in because, listener, I wanted to give you some personal insight. I've had the chance to try some gummies from Studio TBD, and the two different ratios that Robert was just mentioning, the 425 of the one, it is a lot more mellow. A nice 4 milligrams of THC, so you feel like a very, very I mean, I wouldn't even call it a buzz, because you feel the CBD a lot more than you feel the THC. And then on the other hand, the 10-20, 10 milligrams THC and then 20 of the CBD, that one, it is a very different sensation than the 425. There's more energy to it. I myself am partial to sativas, so I kind of leaned into that, felt a little more social, felt like, laughing a little bit easier. What's so cool as well, and I wanted to commend you on this, Robert, was on the back of the packaging, there is a little chart, and there's a curve graph that shows you roughly over time where your level of buzz will get to. You can kind of follow along on your own journey, I suppose, and see how you compare to what the advertisement is on the package. And I found that to be something that was so cool. I haven't seen anything like that on other cannabis packaging, and I thought that was a really cool innovation.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, we've actually gotten a lot of props for those little graphs, but that's because they're accurate. I feel that one thing that I really want to clarify here is that it's not just that CBD pushes down the effects of THC, which in majority the side effects, but also some of the effects, right? If for whatever reason, if you take too much THC, the best way to get out of that is to just pound loads of CBD. But what also happens is that the THC actually boosts the effects of CBD. As you've probably, I don't know how you are, I can actually feel CBD. If I smoke just like pure CBD weed, or if I take like a lot, let's say 150 milligrams of CBD, I can feel it. It's not that I get super high or anything, but I feel a slight relaxation.
Yes.
Some people don't feel anything.
Yeah, I've heard that.
It's a difference.
It's one of those.
It's individual.
It is, exactly. It's a subjectivity, exactly like you were outlining before. People's experience with different cannabis products is totally different, and what your preference is, if you lean more toward the indica or the sativa side of things, that's very subjective. But it's interesting, though. I do know a lot of people who say that they don't feel the CBD. I'm in your group, Robert, where I had some other gummies recently that were around the 60, 70 milligram of CBD and like no THC, and I definitely felt mellow from those. Like there was no THC there, but I could feel it, exactly.
You can't feel it. But what happens when you mix them? So what happens when you take a 425 is that, first of all, you do feel the 4 milligrams of THC, obviously. If you have a very high tolerance, you might not feel that much, but you do feel it. If you're a rookie and you haven't done any cannabis at all for a few months, then you definitely, you get kind of a good
right
from a 425.
Right.
But what's really important to point out is that the 4 milligrams of THC boosts the 25 milligrams of CBD, so everybody feels the CBD high.
It's so fascinating.
So the 425 has like a THC plus CBD high, and the CBD high is actually I would say the majority of what you feel. But now we're getting into personal, what's sort of like individual, different sort of experiences. But what happens is that the THC boosts the CBD. So that is also why the experiences are quite different between the two SKUs. Yeah, those are the two main SKUs that we're going to go with. And we've been in the market with the edibles since May, June, and because they're hemp-derived, they can be sold all over the United States. We're in like 100 stores here in New York and New Jersey. We're in Texas now, a little bit in Florida.
Nice. Sell
them online.
That's wonderful. Very exciting too. Obviously, those are big markets, and shout out to Texas and all of those. Any in Chicago? Are you guys in the Illinois area yet?
We don't have any stores in Chicago yet, but we ship to Illinois. So if anyone's interested, just go to tbd-products.com and you can just order them to your mailbox.
There you go.
Then we have the beverages. The beverages are cannabis infused, so they are inside the closed California licensed loop, is the way I think about it.
Gotcha.
Where everybody needs a license and everything. So we sell the beverage at dispensaries in California, and we're working on going to more states now. But that, like you said, is the issue with like the whole state-to-state thing. But we're going to make a hemp-derived beverage as well, so that's coming to normal stores close to you soon.
That's exciting. Some a little bit of news, something to look forward to, listeners. And in the meantime, as Robert just mentioned, you can go to that website. One more time, Robert, TBD- was
TBD-products.com.
TBD-products.com, and
Yes.
you ship these gummies, hemp derived. Can anybody anywhere can order these from that site?
Yeah, you have to be over 21 years of age, and we ship them to 35 states in the United States. But among those are the ones that I mentioned.
Got it. Yeah, for sure. So legal states. That's the medical.
Yeah, there's been some states that have put another hemp rule on top of the federal rule, but it's quite kind of rare. I think Kentucky is one of them. There is a few states, predominantly to the south, that have sort of made the cannabinoids that come from hemp illegal as well. But 35 states is completely opening right now.
That's very exciting. And as I just mentioned, listener, do yourself a favor and try the gummies that we were just talking about, the two variations, 425 versus the 1020, and, just kind of see how the differences manifest to you. But I thought it was really cool. The taste and the texture of both were really pleasant. I've tried a lot of gummies over the last couple of years. They definitely vary in quality, and the Studio TBD stuff is right there at the high end. Love the taste, love the texture, and the two different feelings of them are nice as well. So definitely head to that site and check this out. Robert, I just wanted to, one more thing here, and I realize this might also be kind of a deep conversation, but there's also some mention of Web3 technology on your websites and kind of in the work that you've done here. Can you give a little bit of a brief rundown to people who might not be familiar what that is and how it can relate to this cannabis space?
Absolutely. I think there's a few connections between Web3 and crypto and cannabis, and one of them is pretty obvious. It's like the whole next generation kind of products. There's a little bit anti-government, decentralized, and super popular among people who want to explore the next phase of everything.
Right. I think NFTs are like a popular example of this. Yeah.
Exactly, and crypto and NFTs they have a really bad rep. There's a few bad actors in the industry that have gotten a lot of headlines, and that's always the case with completely new things, especially digital things that are monetized super quickly as well.
Sure.
What we have done, so we basically see ourselves as a creative studio that work in cannabis. We design the experience of the plant in different ways. We have some new products coming out very, very soon as well that we're very excited about. But we also try to do the same thing with Web3 and crypto. So what we have decided to put Web3 and NFTs basically inside the bloodstream of the company. So what you already can do is that you can mint actually a membership NFT in Studio TBD, which will be filled with a lot of value and a lot of interesting things in the future, but we are not disclosing what that is yet. But what we do disclose is the promise that we will always keep, is that if you have at least one of our membership NFTs, you will get 50% off all the products that we sell on our own website forever.
That's interesting. There's a real tangible value to having that membership token. Then it's not just the theoretical sort of future collector's item kind of value. You get a discount to these products from your site if somebody's got that. Is that right?
That is correct. Yeah, exactly. And then we obviously have some really interesting ideas for how to make it even more valuable, but that's what we promise. So that we think that NFTs and Web3 will, it will change the world. Personally, I think it will change the world more than the internet did, actually. It's just that it's going to take a while, and we have to figure out the real use cases for it. So we are really deeply ingrained in that culture as well. And to go back to what you said in the beginning about culture, because I'm a brand person, right?
Right.
So when we decided to do this brand, usually what you do is you look at what does the industry look like and how do you position yourself versus the competition. And I couldn't draw a map. It was impossible. I stared at cannabis brands for like a week, did nothing else, just stared at all different brands, all different products out there, and tried to like build a map out of it, and I couldn't do it because it's so early, it's such a mess. So what we found out through that exploration is that If you take some of the fringe things aside, like there's some wellness stuff, there's some yoga stuff, there's some anti-pain stuff, but take the sort of the core of what the cannabis industry is right now, that caters to stoners, I would say, or heavy consumers.
I would agree with that, yeah.
I think that in the future, and this is the bet that we're making with our company, is that the mainstream cannabis user will not be a heavy consumer. I think it will be way more like alcohol, that the mainstream alcohol user is a moderate consumer. And a moderate consumer is not downing one bottle of whiskey on a Wednesday night.
Right.
But they might be way more attracted to just popping or drinking a 425
right.
or a 1020.
Yeah, like so getting a 6-pack of beer or something versus like joining a whiskey subscription club. Wine. Yeah, yes, wine too, yes. Right.
So we basically put our products are for the future mainstream customer of cannabis. So our brand has to be there too. And this is where culture come in, right? So for you to become a mainstream brand, you have to hit some sort of cultural sort of nerve. And we are doing it by making cannabis safe and fun again, because our products are way safer than the high THC products. And we want people to have fun. So that's sort of our happy place. That's where we want to be. So we are going to move culturally away from the rap music of the 90s. I mean, I grew up with it. I love it. But I don't think that that's where mainstream will go in the future. So culture is going to be a very, very important thing. And instead of just making something up, we have now put Web3 at the very center of our company. We have put safety and fun at the very center of a company. And all our cannabis also sun-grown, so we have put sustainability at the very center of our company. And now we're going to build entertainment and content out of that will all be connected to both cannabis and Web3.
That does sound very fascinating, exciting. I think the idea of your membership NFT with the guarantee of a discount for products, as well as sort of this mystery box time capsule element of, things down the road, which you haven't announced yet, I think that's very exciting. And I can vouch, as I said before, listener, the gummies are fantastic. The hemp usage and the methods, I think the sticking to high CBD and, sort of making cannabis safe and fun, I definitely think that Robert Lund and Studio TBD are going to go great places. And head to that website he mentioned, tbd-products.com, if you want to try some of these gummies for yourself or find out more about that Web3 and the NFTs in the future there. Robert, thanks a lot for stopping by. I like to end these things with some fun quick hits questions, just favorite stuff. Are you game for this?
Yeah, let's do it.
All right, great. First quick hit, number one, I usually ask, morning bird or night owl? Which are you?
Oh, I'm transitioning from night owl to morning bird.
Well,
yeah, that's a tough one, but I'm trying.
Totally, and let me wish you best of luck on that transition. I know that's difficult. I've had to do it myself, and it's not easy. Sunlight is a major factor in that circadian rhythm adjustment. Let me just throw that out there for sure. Favorite food or cuisine if you're celebrating something? Sort of a wonderful, wildly successful ad campaign that you were working on just, hit the globe and everybody loves it. Where's the meal that you're going to? Restaurant or just any kind of food cuisine item that you love to have?
I mean, I'm a sort of martini steakhouse kind of guy. So
for sure,
it would have to be something very high end, dry aged in the world of steaks.
Nothing wrong with that at all. Medium rare, is that the way?
That is the way. That is the way.
There we go. Excellent. Substance of choice. I ask all my guests this. Are you we've talked about cannabis. That's obviously big for both of us. That can be the answer if it's something that you utilize. But are you a coffee drinker? Do you like tea in the day? Do you have wine or beer on a regular night? What do you lean on in terms of substances?
Well, it's coffee in the morning. It's tea in the afternoon and the evening. And if I'm going to indulge in something, what I tend to do is basically mix our TBDs with mezcal. That's my go-to.
Wow.
Well, you basically take a TBD 425. So if I'm going to go out with a group of friends and, I don't know, how many drinks do you have when you go out? Like between 3 and 10.
Yeah, right. Yes, yeah.
That's like the norm.
Yeah, for sure.
So what I've realized is that if I drink all my drinks and use and mix them with our beverage, our TBD beverage, basically I drink less alcohol And at the end of the night, I've probably had like down, I don't know, 5 TBDs maybe. So that's what, 125 milligrams of CBD, and that is boosted by THC as well. And CBD, as we all know, it works great against nausea and pain.
Yes.
And being hungover is literally only nausea and pain. So it's a great way to kill hangovers and have fun at the same time.
Great point. I can definitely vouch for that. One of the many reasons why I turned to cannabis, as a young adult, was because I found it killed hangovers like nothing else. And that's a great idea to just kind of mix those gummies. The way that you were mentioning that THC and CBD, the way that THC affects the feeling of CBD in people, sort of elevates it. I can remember in my 20s going to parties and finding the dance that sort of cannabis and alcohol can do in your system, and basically feeling the slight difference throughout the night of being a little more drunk one moment versus being a little more stoned later in the night. It's a fascinating kind of just journey, I guess, when you're partying. Just kind of a fun little dance to do among the substances, I suppose. You mentioned music before and kind of the underground disco scene emerging from New York. What do you like to listen to? Either on a regular day, or if you're trying to hype yourself up or mellow out, what do you like?
Regularly is jazz. Jazz is fantastic to always have in the background. And work, conversation, dinners, jazz always works. But for the parties, it's Italo disco for sure.
Italian
disco from the 80s, usually called Italo. That's the most fun stuff that you can listen to.
I'm writing that down. That's fantastic. Thanks for that. And then what do you like to watch? TV shows or movies? I don't know if you're a big movie person or anything, but I mean, anything that either a classic that whenever you see it come on, you're happy to leave it on, or if you're looking for a certain mood or something that you'll always turn on something and it'll get you there. What do you like to watch?
I actually treat visual content a little bit like music. I remember when The Irishman came out on Netflix, I think I watched it like 4 or 5 times, like a week, 2-week period. Because that's what you do that's the time when it was albums. That's what you did with an album.
Right.
One album, listen to it a lot. So I do that. I love movies. I think, unfortunately, together with what we talked about earlier, there are not that many good movies coming out. So I usually love watching movies from the 90s. The late 80s and 90s, I think, was like the high point of movie making. And today, you basically have to wait until Quentin Tarantino makes another movie to have a real art experience in the cinema. So
totally.
So yeah, old movies, and by that I mean 90s, which sounds weird. But
that's what it is. Yeah, and props on the Tarantino drop. I myself just watched Once Upon a Time in Hollywood for about the 20th time since that came out. That is, I know exactly what you mean.
Beautiful.
Yeah, it is. And Tarantino is just one of those. The way he writes, the way he makes movies. I'll watch anything that guy ever does. So I definitely agree with you there. Thanks a lot so much for stopping by today and sharing some of your perspective. Robert Lund of Studio TBD. Listener, if you want to check those gummies out one more time, you can head to tbd-products.com and order some of those because they are delicious and I think you'll like the way they make you feel. Thanks a lot for stopping by, Robert. I hope we can talk again in the future.
Thanks so much for having me. It's been a pleasure to talk to someone who knows this much about everything that you do.
Thank you so much. And yeah, have a great day.
You too. Take it easy.
And there it is. If you'd like to get your hands on some of those delicious Studio TBD gummies, you can head one more time to that tbd-products.com. Yeah, those definitely were worth trying. The taste is really good, kind of pleasant, citrusy flavor, and the texture, it's not too chewy. There's really no infusion aftertaste. Maybe you know what I'm talking about, listener. There's kind of a thing with some gummies where you get this, I'm not really sure how to describe it. I'll have to think of a word for it, but it's, kind of a strange lingering taste from some infused gummies. And one of the things I like about Studio TBDs is that there was none of that. And I really do think that Robert and his team at Studio TBD, I think they're onto something there. This high CBD and lower THC threshold that they're talking about, kind of this point that they've settled into with the gummies and the drinks. I really do think that there is something to that being the future sweet spot for the average cannabis consumer. I'm not sitting here saying that there's nobody who likes high THC products. products. I've smoked some 35% joints, and I've enjoyed that. I've said many times on the show, I lean towards sativas. So for me, the higher THC, the kind of strains that tend to make some people a little nervous or paranoid, doesn't really make me feel that way. I get energized. I get, creatively inspired. I like to get up and do stuff. So for me, sativas are nice. But trying these Studio TBD gummies, I found a wonderful mellow. I thought it was very fun with their packaging and following along that graph or chart, I guess, and just seeing where the arc takes you, keeping you in the mellow space or peaking up into that high buzz area, which you get from the 10-20 kind of a thing. And if you're looking for gummies, it's always fun trying some new cannabis products. And I got to tell you, I think we're going to be seeing a lot more from Studio TBD in the future of legal cannabis in the U.S.
Hello, this is Ruin Willow, and you are listening to the Oh, Fuck Yeah with Ruin Willow podcast. This is erotica, romance author, podcaster, sex blogger, Ruin Willow. And on my podcast, I talk about all things related to sex, sexuality, sexual health, erotica. I want to help you enjoy your life and have better sex using the tools of erotica, erotic audio, and interviews talking with sexuality experts in the field of sexual health, sexuality, and sexual wellness. Come listen to my podcast. I have a wide range of topics and fiction erotica storytelling. Oh, fuck yeah, with Ruin Willow podcast.
And one news story here that I thought was worth bringing to your attention, listener. Voters in Oklahoma shot down an adult use legalization question. This was a special election called solely for the statewide question of legalizing cannabis, and it resulted in a resounding no from voters this week. This was published in the Cannabis Business Times. Eric Sandy wrote it. March 7th is the publication date. Oklahoma voters said no to adult use cannabis legalization Tuesday during a special election devoted solely to state question 820. The margin was never really close from early votes onward. Electoral returns showed a wide gulf between those who supported the measure and those who opposed it. As of this morning, when I'm recording this, March 8th, Wednesday, 100% of the precincts have been tallied. The margin landed at 62 to 38. So 820 in Oklahoma did not pass. That's all the article I will read. But I brought this to your attention, listener, because it's noteworthy for a couple of reasons in my mind. I wanted to just kind of discuss this with you. It's not necessarily that I believe that this attitude of the voters in Oklahoma is pervasive across the country. I've said on the show before, we're at about 70% approval rating in terms of legalizing cannabis in the U.S. recreationally. So 70% of the country of, almost 400 million people, that attitude, people don't agree on things politically, and the fact that you get 70% there is massive. So I don't believe that the voters in Oklahoma are stating something that is sort of a widespread stance. But it is noteworthy that the stigma that I talk about on this show all the time, that you are very well aware of the lingering stench of prohibition, of the reefer madness, of the propaganda and all the dare education, and that original prohibition of cannabis in 1937 in the U.S., which spread around the world. Those connotations, all that branding, all that bad, negative imagery, and all the sort of fear-mongering and racism that was all wrapped up in that, campaign against cannabis. The thoughts, the ripple effects are still being felt for that today. And that is a big reason why there are so many people out there who are maybe in need of some help in their life that perhaps cannabis could offer, but maybe they've never been open enough to trying it because of all the negativity that they'd heard about it from their government, from their local trusted police officer, from their parents, from whomever. But they got a message, and the message was loud and clear for many of us who were alive in the 1900s. You remember the negative advertising around cannabis, and that is still around, alive, and well today. And I think there were clearly a lot of people in Oklahoma that sort of find themselves on that side of the issue. 62-38 with all their precincts, that's almost 2-1. It's at that close, it's close to that point. And that shows you that it wasn't exactly close. A lot of the time with elections in this country with two parties, 50-50 is kind of how we go. So the first further away from 50% that you get in terms of carrying an election or some measure being voted through, it really speaks volumes as to where the approval or the support for that is. And right now, at least in Oklahoma, it seems they're a long way away from legalizing recreational cannabis. But hey, I'm not exactly sure what there is to do in Oklahoma anyway, besides maybe dodge some tornadoes or go to the Tulsa Massacre Museum. If you don't know about that, you should really look it up. But yeah, I can't really point to a lot of prescience or a lot of great historic moments in Oklahoma anyway. Maybe I'm just, down on my history. Maybe I'm unaware of something. Please feel free to point it out to me. You can leave a little reply or ask a question in this handy little pop-up on Spotify now. If you're listening to the show on Spotify, you can scroll down in the episode and there's a little question of how you liked it. You can reply. Feel free to ask me any questions or leave some feedback. Always love engaging with you on the topic of cannabis. But in the meantime, there are plenty of states which have already legalized. We're over 35 for medical. We're at 21 now for recreational. And very soon here, in the next few years, there's going to be more than half of the United States which have recreationally legalized cannabis. And it'll be, one of those decisions for the feds to make, for the Federal Oversight Office to be looking into how we schedule cannabis and decriminalization, legalization, all of that. And it's a very exciting time, but I think this Oklahoma vote is a real reality check for a lot of us who are, pro-cannabis and supporting this and want to see the doors thrown open and this interstate commerce market be allowed to flourish and just everybody kind of be able to incorporate it and normalize it as a part of your life. I think those of us who want that, this Oklahoma result here is a real reality check, and it's something to be aware of. Not everybody is on board with legalizing cannabis, just kind of throwing the doors open here. And there's a lot of people who still are feeling that stigma, who still believe the propaganda that was so widespread in the 1900s about the devil's lettuce and everything evil that cannabis would bring about in a life. And that foolishness is still, unfortunately, has a bit of a stranglehold on the minds of some Americans and citizens around the globe. So it's just something to keep in mind. I love it, and as I've said here before, listener, I do not believe cannabis is right for everybody. I'm not arguing that it's a perfect solution for everybody's problems. But what I simply do want is for those of us who've decided that it is right for us, we should be able to use it as freely and openly as people do with alcohol or cigarettes or caffeine, any other substance that we lean on to get through our day in this, human journey. We all keep waking up every day and do the best we can. Why in the hell, because I want cannabis as my substance of choice, why do I have to duck behind the garage or make sure I'm in the right state or, just kind of live my life in this secretive, seedy, almost, criminalistic and limited way? That part of it I'm done with, and I'm very thankful to be living in Illinois, which is a state that has embraced it, is legalized it, and is licensing more and more dispensaries, craft growers all the time. I know people complain about the prices, but those are going down. I've already seen it, and more of that's going to happen as more business owners and more entrepreneurs enter this space. Just like my second ever guest said, Pam Altoff. She runs the Cannabis Business Association of Illinois. She said in my very second episode, if you haven't listened, I'd go back and check it out. She said that as more dispensaries were licensed, as more people entered into this legal cannabis space, prices would come down. Competition between businesses drives down prices because they're chasing our dollars. So it's better for us as the consumer. But what we don't want, there is a fine line here. I've heard people argue, hey, just stop with the license caps. Just throw it all open. I've cautioned before and I say so again now, you can't just throw the doors open because there is a very real risk of bottoming out the value of the cannabis market. We've seen that happen in Canada. We've seen it happen in Colorado and in some parts of Oregon. And California has concerns about it now too. And California is ground zero for support of cannabis. So if this can happen in those states, it can certainly happen here. And I am rooting for legal cannabis. I want these dispensaries and this market to be strong, to flourish, to prosper, so that in 30 years, when I'm hopefully retired and I just want to be able to, stop on the way back from a golf course or on the way out to dinner and restock my joint supply. I want to be able to do that as easily as I can go pick up a six-pack. And I fear that if the cannabis market, the legal cannabis market, doesn't stay strong, I fear that this little paradise we find ourselves in now, even though it's only a hodgepodge paradise, a sort of some people have it, some people don't, with the patchwork legalizing in different states, even though it's not fully, some of us are in paradise right now with legal cannabis, and I want to stay there. I do not want to go back to the dark days of Prohibition where I had to go meet somebody I'd never met at a basketball court in the darkness in the middle of the night and pick up a bag of something that God knows what was in there. I don't want to go back to those days. But it's not really up to me, and it's not up to any one person necessarily. We all have to be supportive of legal cannabis here and just hope that the good stuff, the good times, keep on rolling forward. But the good times are going to keep on rolling here, at least for the foreseeable future on the Cannabis Man podcast here. I've got another great interview for you next week. I'm speaking with a grief counselor, so to speak, and a medium. She uses cannabis as a way of helping people deal with grief from loss. And she personally, very personally, has found, learned, and understood the difference between utilizing alcohol and utilizing cannabis for sort of processing your grief and dealing with the loss of loved ones and the unfortunate, one of the really, really tough parts of being here on this earth and among other humans and the connections that we form socially. Unfortunately, we all experience loss at some point. And my guest next week has some really interesting ideas as to how we can use cannabis a little better to help us therapeutically and, be more connected with those people that we've lost and kind of move forward in our lives instead of just sort of pressing pause on that trauma and, just not really moving forward in life and just leaning heavily on alcohol every night and just kind of, blacking out and not really processing anything. So that's next week. And of course, I'll bring to you some news stories and events coming up. And we've got some very, very exciting stuff down the line, listener. I just recorded an interview this week that is without a doubt the biggest interview that I have ever done in my professional career of broadcasting, of everything else. And that guest is coming up for my 1-year anniversary of doing the show, which is going to be 4/20 of this year. So I got a lot planned for that 1-year anniversary special, and that includes this massive interview that I'm talking about. So a lot of exciting stuff in the future. Thank you so much for listening to this show as I've been doing it. I know it's not as consistent as I want it to be. I'm endeavoring to make sure I'm getting an episode out every week, and I could certainly use your help with that. If you want to support the show, if you like what I'm doing here, you can always support the show by scrolling through the show description notes and just hit that support show link. That'll take you to the show Patreon page, and if you donate, you can get some free stuff, and it certainly helps keep this podcast going, and I do want to make this show better so I can continue to bring you better and better content. But for now, that's all I got for you today. Have a wonderful rest of your week and weekend, and we'll talk next week right here on the Cannabis Man podcast. Cannabis Man is an original production of myself, Don Kleppen. Original theme music by Yusu Kim, aka Goodson. Other music by Pat Perez, and logo designed by Vorbroker Media. If you like the show, please rate, review, subscribe, and share whenever you can.